These are some random memories I have about work. We were doing a demolition in some really old factory. We had to take out all the plugs, and they had these gray switch boxes and panels and stuff. We had to take the cover off, disconnect all the wires or just cut them, and then pull the thing off the wall and throw it in a bin. My apprentice, he's working away and I'm working away, he's beside me, and then he just falls down on the floor. Actually, he had the box in his hand. He opened the door of the box, and then I think he just pried it off with a hammer or something. But he's holding his hand, and then he fell down, dropped the box, and he's laughing and laughing and laughing. So I said, "What's going on?" So he opened the door of this box, and this poor little mouse, we had to analyze this logically, how this mouse got in there. A mouse crawled through a 1/2-inch EMT pipe that already had 3 number 14 X-link conductors in it, and you could just see it. The mouse had, like, here's the pipe, and the mouse had come out of the pipe, and then he spread his little arms, kind of like a weightlifter, and one paw was on one terminal and the other paw was on the other terminal, and he was electrocuted in the shape of, I guess you could say, Jesus on the cross. It was just the same pose as you see those paintings of Jesus on the cross. And not only that, but the mouse had an expression on his face of pain, like he's still being electrocuted. We don't know how many years he'd been in there. So I started laughing, and we just threw it down and just had a good laugh over that. Another random memory. I was pretty good at bending pipe. I actually built a lot of my own furniture out of electrical metallic tubing, 1/2-inch and 3/4 inch, and I got good at bending. And I would build my own, like, swinging benches. I built a table, or sorry, 2 little tables which you already saw on the Old Things tour, and I built a his and hers chair for me and my wife, Jane, at that time. And it was so comfortable because I took measurements of our body for the chair. I built the chair exactly to our specifications. I had a lounger chair, and I built her a chair that was similar. Easy to get in and out, and that was so comfortable. But I ended up having to get rid of them. Just too much furniture to move from place to place. Let's see, very first day on the job, the very first thing that I did for Morris Electric was I helped Dad, 1974, set up these material storage huts on some vacant lot down in the industrial area of Edmonton. I just remember it was like after work, like somewhere between 5 and 8 or 9, and we were just setting these things up. Okay, that was the very first thing that I did for Morris Electric, but I wasn't full-time yet. The very first thing that I did, very first few minutes of the very first day for Morris Electric as an apprentice electrician, as a full-time employee, was for Associated Engineering. It was a 120 volt plug in their engineering department, and it was in a white building with these squares on the outside, 122nd Street, somewhere downtown. I think it was the east or west side of Edmonton, downtown. Yeah, it was the west side. 122nd would be west side, because downtown would be 100th. And I was wearing these ugly rayon work clothes, they were called, and they were hand-me-downs from my dad, so like they're 20% too big. So I'm walking around like a total clown, just about tripping over this outfit. But I did remember, I told myself, I said, I have to remember this because it's the very first thing that I did. So I wired up a plug, I did it correctly, and I was a first-year apprentice, so I was just learning about which wire goes to which terminal, how to put a cover plate on, the different tools you need. Odd memory, we worked for Associate Engineering for many years. Then they moved, so they moved out to a St. Albert Trail location. This thing was massive, so we were there all the time replacing bulbs, and this was 347 volt lighting, I think. And I had to go into the, it was a secretarial pool or data entry pool. Okay, this is all women in an enclosed space. There was probably, I'd say 20 women, and various degrees of hotness. And I'm minding my own business. I set up the ladder, and these women were cackling when I came in. They're all talking, doing their job, but they're talking at the same time. And so I climbed up the ladder, and they're all making comments about how good looking I was and how strong and handsome, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm on the ladder. One of them came up and just grabbed my package, and I kind of jumped. This is not a good thing to be doing when you're working with live electricity, right? I felt really uncomfortable. I was violated that day, but I didn't complain. Let's see. Oh, right, about bending pipe. I was working for another outfit. It wasn't my dad at that time, but we were wiring up a school. I was on loan to another outfit, and we were wiring up a school, and of course schools are all this block, 8-inch block, 12-inch block, I can't remember. So you're putting everything in block, and everything is EMT. Well, we had to put up this, maybe it's like a fire alarm bell or something, and a lot of different pipes had to go into this one 4-inch square box, and they're like two side by side, and there was tons of pipes that had to go in the top, and I was supposed to build all these runs, right? So the only way that I could make this thing work was to interweave just like a piece of cloth, okay, like this here, like that, okay? I had to build a piece of interwoven cloth out of steel pipe, and I did it. And my boss came by. I don't know if I was a journeyman at that time yet. It might have been like I was a 3rd or 4th year. And he came by, and he was just shocked. And he showed off his boss what I had done. Of course, they never gave me an attaboy or anything like that. They just thought it was pretty amazing that I could do that. Anyway, everything pulled through fine. Like there was no hang-ups in the pipe. Let's see, oh, right, okay, so then I went through unemployment for quite a while, and then I went back to school. When I was learned about programming, I got a job as a programmer, which was absolutely amazing because 1989 there was no jobs to be had, and I applied at the U of A hospital tissue typing lab, and I can't say what I did the very first day, but my first task was to rewrite a program, a little custom software program that matches organ donors to organ recipients. And I was in the histocompatibility tissue typing lab. And I had to study somebody else's code. So this is like the story of your life. If you're a custom programmer, your whole life is reading someone else's code, looking at their database, figuring out what it is they were trying to do, and then build it better. So you're reading code, reading old code, interviewing users, interviewing the customer, the paying customer, what do they want to have happen, and building data pumps. I built data pumps from the very first few weeks of my career up until the present day, let's just say. Data pumps, data pumps, data pumps. So I was so proud of that job. I was making, I forget how much it was. It wasn't much. It was like half the money I was making as an electrician. But I was so proud because I was actually helping to save save their life and improve their life. So if they got a transplant, then they could get off of dialysis. And I was working in a hospital with really top-level doctors. These guys were well known throughout Canada because they'd published a lot. So I'd gone from like a use your body, half your body, half your brain kind of a job to use all your brain kind of a job. And I was so thankful because I was inside during the winters. Didn't have to climb up 70-foot cracking towers, 28 below, freezing my butt off. So I had a lot of interesting things happen while I was a programmer and as an electrician. I was at the top of Edmonton House. Sandy McTaggart and John de la Brugier, these were partners, and they owned rental properties all over the world. They owned Edmonton House. I was up there. I was doing maybe a fire alarm system. I was working for a different company, and I was told that John de la Brugier was on Sandy McTaggart was on a 3-year vacation on his yacht or something like this, right? I went up there, top floor. This is some office space, really, really amazing office space. They had a little tiny coffee room with a view of the river valley, tiny little window. And so me and my boss at that time I'm the shorter guy, so I'm up in the ceiling crawling around. I think I had 16 inches space between what seemed to be it wasn't lath and plaster, it was some kind of hard ceiling, kind of cement-like ceiling, suspended ceiling, and of course they had all their pipe and wire up above that, and then there was the concrete above it. So I was sent up through an access hatch to run all this cable. We weren't doing conduit there, we were just doing cable for the fire alarm. And we just happened to be on coffee break, and in walks this guy. And he looks like he's like partly sunburned. He's not the tallest guy in the bunch, but we'd been up there for a few days, and everybody in that office was in really expensive suits, really nice dresses, all being really professional. So anyway, these really well-dressed people were guiding around this short-ish little guy in a crappy-looking suit, half sunburned. They came to the break room, and one of the guys was saying, and this is the break room, and we're going to do this here and this here, and we're going to... So I learned later that was Sandy McTaggart himself. And we were moving through like the different rooms. And in the electrical room, they had stacks and stacks of photographs of apartment blocks that these guys... McLab Enterprises, that's what it was. That McLab Enterprises owned all over the world. We were in Sandy McTaggart's office, and on the mantle he had a picture of himself and Sophia Loren. So that was kind of amazing. But I worked at a lot of different, like mostly commercial, a little bit of industrial. I was at Dow Chemical, and we were in I think it was some kind of fertilizer storage. I don't know if you call it a bin, but a Quonset. Oh my God, this thing was big, and no interior structure. It was just a curvature that held up the roof, and we were putting in smoke detectors or something, or heat detectors. And I remember going behind a stub wall to get something, and I noticed that the concrete was jelly. Whatever was stored in that room was able to dissolve concrete if it got wet. I think as long as it was dry, it was fine. But yeah, tons and tons of stories. That's all I can remember right now. I remember in my programming job, I was working for CAE, Canadian Aviation Electronics, and then they got bought out by Spar Aerospace, and then they got bought out by L3 Communications. And I was in my own partnership for a while. And then we had a situation where the database that I was using, that I knew had been very reliable, it was running on a server at one of our customers' places, and it kept failing and failing and failing. And their systems people kept blaming my database. They said, oh, it's blue screening because of your database. And I insisted, no, I was in a position of enough authority that I forbid them from changing databases. So I said, that's not it. That is not what the problem is. And the person working for me, yeah, this is my partnership we were in. So the person working for me, he was able to have the authority to not change databases, don't even consider it. So they said, okay, I said, it's got to be hardware. So they took the server apart, and they found that the motherboard was cracked. So, like, we had just turned the entire situation around. They thought that my database choice was unreliable, and I actually proved, me and my employee figured out that it had rebooted at least 200 times, and the database was still intact. So it proved that it wasn't the database's fault, but not only that, the database was extremely reliable. It was able to withstand being blue screened at least 200 times in a couple of days. Once they replaced the motherboard, it was fine, and it ran fast and reliable, just what I told them. I'm not going to get into brand names because I've always said that database programmers, it's like their favorite cigarette. They'd rather fight than switch. There's an old cigarette ad from the 60s when the guy's got a black eye and he's got a cigarette. He says, I'd rather fight than switch, for his brand, right? Well, database programmers are the same way. You can give them all kinds of reasons why they should switch, but they will not switch because it's a core of their identity, because it has to be reliable and it has to be fast, because your paycheck depends on it, and so does everybody else's. That's all I can think of for now. That's a long enough video. It's 18 minutes.